the entire night. The first half of the night, he thought about what on earth could have befallen Lan Wangji in the past few years, and only when the second half came did he drift into a foggy slumber. Early morning the next day, he opened his eyes and noticed that Lan Wangji had already left for who knows where. Only then did he lay properly on the bed, his hands placed over his body, in a position that suggested he knew his place. In one swift motion, he threw off his blanket, then buried his right-hand fingers into his hair. It was impossible to rid himself of the absurd yet terrifying, unaccountable feelings. 2 light knocks sounded against the Jingshi's wooden door, and Lan Sidre's voice echoed inside. "Young Master Mo, have you risen? Why are you calling on me this early?" Wei Wuxian said. Early, Lan Sidre said, "but it's already 9. The entirety of the Lan clan rose at 5 in the morning and retired at 9 at night with law-like regularity. Wei Wuxian, on the other hand, woke up at 9 in the morning and went to bed at 1 the following morning, also with law-like regularity, exactly 4 hours behind the Lan clan. Since he had lain face down for half the night, his abdomen was sore and his back hurt. "I can't get up," he said sincerely. What's happened to you now?" Lan Sidre asked. "What's happened to me? Your clan's Han Guangjun ravished me." Lan Jingyi piped up louder and fiercer. "If you keep spouting nonsense, we're not going to let it go. Come out." Wei Wuxian spoke as though falsely accused. "It's true. He ravished me the whole night. I'm not coming out. I'm too embarrassed to see anyone." The juniors outside glanced at each other, not knowing whether to laugh or to cry. Others could not enter Han Guangjun's quarters at will, so they couldn't just go in and drag him out. Lan Jingyi erupted. "You're so shameless and brazen. Han Guangjun isn't gay. He slept with you. I'd thank the heavens if you didn't try to sleep with him. Get up, rein in that donkey of yours, and take it away. It's noisy as hell." Once they mentioned his mount, Wei Wuxian hastily rolled out of bed. "What did you do to my little apple?" he said. "Don't touch it. It loves kicking people." "What's a little apple?" Lan Jingyi asked. "My donkey," Wei Wuxian said. He exited the Jingsha, drove away the juniors, and made them take to his mount. He was led to a patch of verdant field, and sure enough, the donkey was there, braying and making an endless racket. It wailed because it hungered for the grass, but a few dozen round white pom-poms had gathered on it, preventing it from lowering its mouth to the green. Wei Wuxian's voice was delighted. "There's so many bunnies. Come here, come here. Let's stick them on the skewer and start roasting them." Smoke began spewing from all of the holes in Lan Jingyi's head. "Killing is prohibited in the cloud recesses," he shouted. "Shut your donkey up right now. The disciples doing their morning reading already came over several times to ask about it. If this goes on, they'll berate us to death." Wei Wuxian took out the apple from the breakfast they had given him and offered it to the donkey. As expected, as soon as the animal bit in, it stopped braying and began smacking its lips and crunching the fruit with its teeth instead. Wei Wuxian touched the back of its neck and thought about the jade passage tokens that the juniors carried while pointing at the round, white rabbits covering the ground. "I'm really not allowed to cook them?" he asked. "So if I cooked them, I'd be chased off the mountain?" As though facing a major enemy, Lan Jingyi opened his arms and stepped in front of him immediately. "These are Han Guangjun's rabbits. We just help watch them once in a while. Don't you dare cook them." Once Wei Wuxian heard this, he nearly knocked himself over laughing. For heaven's sake, Lan Chan, really, he thought. When I tried to give them to him as a gift once upon a time, he refused to take them, but now he's secretly raising a whole horde of them. And he said he didn't want them. Who was he kidding? Have mercy. In reality, he has to be fond of these fluffy white things. Stone-faced Han Guangjun, cuddling one of these rabbits. Oh my gods, I can't take it anymore. But once he remembered how he had lain atop Lan Wangji's body last night, his laughter abruptly stopped. Right then, bells rang from the western side of the cloud recesses. There was a marked difference between these bells clanging and the ring of the bells that told the time. These bells were urgent and violent, as though rung by a long-suffering madman. Lan Jingyi and Lan Sidre's expressions changed dramatically. No longer having the time to participate in Wei Wuxian's buffoonery, they left him behind and started running. Realizing that something was wrong, he immediately raced after them. The sound of the bells came from a corner watchtower. This watchtower was called the Abyssal Tower. Its 4 walls were constructed with special materials and carved with spells, and the Lan clan used it to summon spirits. When the tower's bells spontaneously began ringing, it meant only one thing. An accident had happened to those performing the summoning ritual inside. Surrounding the tower outside, the number of juniors and disciples grew and grew, but no one dared enter rashly. A pitch-black wooden door stood at the Abyssal Tower's entrance, securely locked and openable solely from the inside. From the outside, it wasn't just difficult to break down the door, it was also prohibited. An accident during a spirit summoning ritual was a terrifying event, as no one knew exactly what had been summoned or what would happen if they boldly charged in. In all the time since the Abyssal Tower had been erected, there had never been a single summoning failure. This only increased the disciples' anxiety. Seeing no sign of Lan Wangji, an ominous feeling came over Wei Wuxian. If Lan Wangji was still inside the cloud recesses, he ought to have immediately rushed over upon hearing the warning bells. Unless, suddenly, the black doors crashed open and a disciple in white hastily staggered out. His feet were unsteady. Thus, as soon as he rushed past the threshold, he fell and rolled down the steps. The Abyssal Tower's doors slammed shut by themselves soon after, as though someone had shoved them in a rage. All those near the disciple tried to help him up at once, but no sooner had he gotten to his feet, he fell again. With a face full of uncontrollable tears, he clutched at someone and said, We shouldn't have summoned. Wei Wuxian grabbed his hand and lowered his voice. What spirit are you trying to summon? Who's still inside? Where's Han Guangjun? He asked. The disciple seemed to have great difficulty breathing, but he opened his mouth and said, Han Guangjun told me to flee. But before he had finished speaking, dark red blood began pouring from his nose and his mouth. Wei Wuxian pushed him into Lan Sidre's arms and bounded up the stairs in a couple of strides, the hastily carved bamboo flute still attached to his waist. He kicked the door and shouted commandingly, Open. Suddenly, the entrance parted its mouth and laughed maniacally. Wei Wuxian quickly darted inside, and the doors closed right behind him. Shocked, several disciples rushed after him, but the doors wouldn't open again, no matter how hard they tried. A guest cultivator threw himself at the door. Shocked and furious, he blurted out, Exactly who the hell was that just now? Lan Sidre, still supporting the disciple who had rushed out, spoke through gritted teeth. Help me first. He's bleeding from all over his face. Upon entering the Abyssal Tower, Wei Wuxian felt an oppressive dark energy close in on him. This dark energy seemed like resentful, raging, and frenzied energies mixed into one, nearly visible to the naked eye. If it surrounded someone, they would feel a dull, suffocating ache pressed down into the pit of their stomach. The interior of the abyssal tower was over 10 meters in length and width, and several people were unconscious and lying haphazardly in its four corners. The summoning target had been set upright atop the spell array, drawn in the center. There was nothing besides a single arm, the arm they had suppressed and brought back from Moor Manor. It stood as straight as a wooden rod, its severed end resting on the ground. 4 of its fingers were balled into a fist, while its index finger aimed skywards, as though pointed at someone in rage. This was the source of the unending flow of dark energy flooding the abyssal tower. Those who had participated in the spirit summoning ritual had either fled or fallen, except the ritual leader in the east. Lan Wangji continued to sit upright and still. A Guqin laid flat by his side. Though his hands were not on the strings, they continued to vibrate on their own. At first, he seemed to be deep in thought or listening to something with rapt attention, and only when he sensed an intruder did he lift his head. Lan Wangji's expression was forever a windless, waveless lake, and Wei Wuxian had no idea what was running through his mind. Lan Qiren, who had originally been seated in another cardinal direction on the spell array, had already fallen over onto his side, and just like the disciple who had fled the abyssal tower, he was unconscious and bleeding from every orifice on his head. Wei Wuxian took his position, turned, and stepped into place as ritual leader in the west, opposite to Lan Wangji. He pulled his flute from his waist, lifted it to his lips, and became Lan Wangji's distant counterpart. That night, at Moor Manor, Wei Wuxian had first distracted the arm with his whistle, and Lan Wangji then struck it with the sound of his Guqin from afar. They had unintentionally worked in concert to suppress it. Now, Lan Wangji's gaze met his, and, comprehending, Lan Wangji lifted his right hand. A string of notes flowed out swiftly, and Wei Wuxian's flute joined in at once. The song they played was named Soul Evocation. Using the corpse of the dead, in part or whole, or some beloved object of theirs as a medium, the music drew the departed spirit toward the summoner. Frequently, all that was needed was a few stanzas before the shape of the spirit emerged in the center of the spell array. However, even as Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji approached the end of the song, no soul appeared before them. As the arm raged, blue veins bulged from all its tendons and muscle, and the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. If it had been anyone else guarding the array's west position, they could not have escaped Lan Qiren's blood-filled fate and would have fallen long ago. Wei Wuxian was secretly apprehensive. It should have been impossible for their soul evocation duet to fail to summon the deceased's spirit. Unless it had been severed into pieces with his corpse. It looked like his dear brother here had died a slightly worse death than him. Though Wei Wuxian's body had been ripped into smaller pieces, at least his soul had remained intact and whole. As soul evocation had failed, the tune emanating from Lan Wangji's fingers changed. The new song contrasted sharply with the sinister, inquisitorial one which had preceded it. It was serene and peaceful, and was named Tranquil Lullaby. Both of these melodies were widely circulated and widely practiced amongst cultivators, so it wouldn't be strange for anyone to be able to play them. Wei-Wuxian automatically followed Lan Wangji's lead. The healing patriarch's ghostly flute was named Chunqing, and it was notorious across the land. But joining in with his bamboo flute, he intentionally blew several wrong notes, skipped a few others, and inhaled too little breath, so that his playing became unbearable. Lan Wangji had probably never played with anyone who produced such a disaster. After a while, he could no longer bear to continue, as though nothing was happening. He lifted his head and stared at Wei-Wuxian expressionlessly. Wei-Wuxian thickened his skin, acted as though he couldn't see, and played more and more out of tune. He turned around and was about to continue blowing when suddenly something odd happened behind him. Turning his head to get a look, he felt shock run through him. The previously unconscious Lan Qiren was sitting up as straight as an iron rod, bleeding and emitting smoke from every hole on his face. His beard, throat, and hands all shook as he pointed at Wei-Wuxian. With all of his remaining strength, he let out a hoarse shout. "Stop playing! Out! Out now! I forbid!" Before he finished saying what exactly Wei-Wuxian was forbidden to do, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell back to the ground, once again sinking into a near-dead stupor. Lan Wangji was speechless. Wei-Wuxian stared, his mouth hanging open. He knew what Lan Qiren had meant to say after "I forbid." "I forbid you from playing. I forbid you from joining in. I forbid you from polluting the music of my beloved disciples, Guqin." Wei-Wuxian and Lan Wangji's duet was so hideous it had enraged Lan Qiren awake, and then enraged him into fainting again. Nonetheless, the pressure exerted by the combined music of the flute and Guqin caused the hand to droop slowly down. Wei-Wuxian, who was completely devoid of shame, thought that it didn't matter how grating the sound was, as long as it produced results. As soon as the final string stopped humming, the entrance of the abyssal tower swung open and sunlight spilled inside. The alarm bells of the corner watchtower had likely stopped ringing, as all the disciples surrounding the tower rushed inside and immediately began calling, "Han Guangjun." Lan Wangji's hand pressed over his Guqin strings in order to prevent them from continuing to hum, and rose to check Lan Qiren's pulse. With his leadership, the others quickly calmed. The older seniors laid those who were bleeding flat on the ground and provided emergency care, administering acupuncture and medicine. Another group of disciples hauled over a large bronze bell, planning to trap the arm inside. Though the scene was busy, all was orderly and quiet. The disciples spoke in hushed tones, and not a single person caused any clamor. A few fretful disciples said, "Han Guangjun, neither the medicines nor the needles are having any effect. What should we do?" 3 of Lan Wangji's fingers were still pressed against Lan Qiren's pulse, and his brows were knit in concentration. He said nothing. Lan Qiren had led at least 800 soul-summoning rituals, if not 1,000. Fierce ghosts and ferocious spirits weren't lacking amongst the souls he had summoned, but even he had been injured by the resentful energies counterattack. From this, it was clear that the ghost's resentment was not only terrifying, they had never seen anything like it. Wei-Wuxian stuck his flute back by his waist and squatted beside the bronze bell. He stroked the gilded inscriptions as he reflected. Suddenly, he spotted Lan Sijui's gloomy expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. Lan Sijui had known for a while that Wei-Wuxian wasn't someone to be trifled with. Slightly hesitant, he said quietly, "I just feel a little guilty, that's all." "Guilty about what?" Wei Wuxian asked. "This ghost hand appeared because of us," he responded. Wei Wuxian smiled. "How do you know?" Yin summoning flags of different caliber are drawn differently and have different levels of power. The flags we drew at Moor Manor were only effective within a 2.5-kilometer radius. But this ghost hand has so much killing intent and feeds by sucking people's flesh, blood, and spirit out of them. If the arm had started within range, based on its ferocity, Moor Manor would have already turned into a river of blood. However, it only appeared after we had arrived. In other words, some black-hearted person had to have intentionally placed it there at the time. "You've done your homework well, and your analysis is solid," Wei Wuxian said. Then Sidrui lowered his head. "If this is the case, those people at Moor Manor, we're afraid we have to take responsibility, and now Mr. Lan and everyone else have fallen unconscious and won't wake up." The silence was heavy. After a moment, Wei Wuxian patted his shoulder and said, "The one responsible isn't you. It's the person who put the ghost hand there in the first place. There are some things in this world which are out of our control." Nearby, Lan Wangji's fingers slackened and he released Lan Qiren. The crowd of Lan disciples hurriedly asked, "Han Guangjun, what now?" "Trace the arm's origin," Lan Wangji said. "Correct," Wei Wuxian said. "Trace the ghost hand's origin, find the rest of its body, figure out the owner's identity, and we'll naturally find a way to save him." Though Lan Jingyi already knew Wei Wuxian couldn't possibly be a lunatic, he was still unable to keep himself from criticizing. "You're making it sound too simple. The spirit summoning didn't work, and look at how much trouble it's caused already. Where are we even going to look?" "Northwest," Lan Wangji said. "Northwest?" Lan Sidrui said, puzzled. "Han Guangjun, why northwest?" "Hasn't it been pointed out to you already?" Wei Wuxian said. Lan Jingyi looked dubious. "Pointed out to me? By whom? Who pointed it out?" "Han Guangjun hasn't pointed out anything." "That thing," Wei Wuxian replied. Suddenly, everyone realized that he was pointing at that ghost hand. The arm pointed in a single, fixed direction. If anyone changed its position, it would stubbornly turn around and return to its original orientation. The people gathered had never seen anything like this before and were interminably stunned. Lan Jingyi said, "It? What is it pointing at?" "What else could it be pointing at?" Wei Wuxian asked. "Either the parts of its corpse or the murderer who put him in this situation." Upon hearing this, a few people who happened to be standing to the northwest immediately ducked away. Lan Wangji glanced at Wei Wuxian, slowly rose, and addressed all of the disciples. "Please take proper care of my uncle." They nodded. "Understood. Does this mean you're going down the mountain?" Lan Wangji lowered his head slightly. Wei Wuxian snuck right behind him, then said to himself, loudly and cheerfully, "Yes, yes, finally we can go down the mountain and elope." Everyone's face filled with horror. The older disciples looked especially terrified, but the younger ones had gotten kind of accustomed to it. However, when the eyebrows of the still unconscious, still prone figure of Lan Qiren twitched, everyone began thinking that if this person kept talking, he might just enrage Lan Qiren away again.